My name is Daniel Hartley, and I'm an engineer. That's not just what I do, it's who I am. For 23 years, I've worked at Boeing's Everett facility, ensuring that machines weighing hundreds of tons can safely carry people through the sky. Every bolt has a purpose, every system has redundancies, and every anomaly has an explanation. Which is why finding that third garage door opener changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I'd taken a half day from work to install a dash cam in Melanie's Audi. A surprise gift after she'd mentioned feeling unsafe during her evening commutes from the law firm. My wife of 8 years worked as a tax attorney downtown, and the parking garage stories she'd been telling lately had me concerned. As I wedged myself between the passenger seat and center console to run the power cable, my fingers brushed against something plastic, buried deep beneath months of coffee receipts and parking stubs. A garage door opener, but not ours. We used LiftMaster, and this was a Genie. Different frequency, different coding system. Completely incompatible with our home system. I sat back in the driver's seat, turning the device over in my hands with the same attention I'd give a suspect aircraft part. Model Gen R3X, manufactured in 2019. The wear patterns on the plastic told a story. Someone had pressed that open button thousands of times. The serial number was partially worn but still visible under the magnifying glass I kept in my toolbox. Must be from the previous owner, I muttered to myself. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Melanie had bought this car brand new 3 years ago. I'd been with her at the dealership, remembered the new car smell, the plastic still on the seats. That evening, I didn't mention my discovery. Instead, I watched my wife with an engineer's eye for detail. She came home at 7:30. Same as always, kissing me hello with the same brief peck she'd given me for years. "How was your day?" I asked, noting how she set her purse in exactly the same spot on the entry table. "Exhausting. The Patterson audit is becoming a nightmare. They didn't keep half the receipts they claimed they did." She kicked off her heels, leaving them precisely 18 inches from the door, a habit I'd teased her about but now seemed significant. "I'll probably have some late nights this week." "Tuesday and Thursday again?" She paused, just for a microsecond. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. "Most likely. You know how it is during audit season." I did know how it was, or thought I did. But now, watching her move through our evening routine, shower, comfortable clothes, dinner together while discussing our days, I began cataloging things I'd previously dismissed. Those Tuesday and Thursday nights when she couldn't sleep, claimed insomnia from work stress. How she'd encouraged me to go to bed without her, take melatonin, promise to join me soon. How I'd wake briefly when she finally came to bed hours later, her skin sometimes cool to the touch. "The AC in the living room is too strong," she'd always said. "I fall asleep on the couch watching TV." The next Thursday, I made a decision. After dinner, I complained about my back, an old injury from my military days that occasionally flared up. "I think I'll take one of those muscle relaxers the doctor prescribed," I told her, making a show of rubbing my lower spine. "They knock me out pretty good." "You should get some rest," Melanie agreed, barely looking up from her laptop. "I've got at least 3 more hours of work anyway." I went through my bedtime routine deliberately slowly, ensuring she heard the shower, the electric toothbrush, the prescription bottle rattling. When I climbed into bed at 9 p.m., I made sure to position myself facing away from the door, then began the deep, steady breathing I'd perfected during countless red-eye flights. At 10:47, I heard our bedroom door creak open. "Daniel," Melanie whispered. "Honey." I maintained my breathing, even adding a small snore for authenticity. She waited another moment, then I heard her footsteps retreating down the hall. The house fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and my own controlled breathing. At 11:03, I heard it, the mechanical whir of a garage door opening. But not our garage door. I'd disconnected our opener earlier that day, claiming to investigate a grinding noise that needed attention. No, this sound came from outside, muffled but distinct to someone who'd been listening for it. Melanie's Audi started with its characteristic soft purr. She was careful, backing out slowly, no headlights, until she reached the street. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then slipped out of bed and dressed in dark clothing I'd laid out in my closet. My electric bike was in the basement workshop, fully charged and ready. Following someone in suburban Kirkland should have been difficult, but I knew my wife's driving patterns like I knew technical specifications. She obeyed every traffic law, never exceeded speed limits by more than 3 miles per hour, always chose the most efficient route. I stayed parallel on bike paths, catching glimpses of her white Audi at intersections, my engineering mind calculating vectors and probabilities. She wasn't heading to her office. Not to the 24-hour Safeway where she sometimes claimed to go when she couldn't sleep. Not to her mother's house in Bellevue or anywhere else that made sense. 3 streets over, I could hardly believe how close it was, she turned onto Oak Meadow Drive. A quiet cul-de-sac I'd passed countless times walking our neighbor's dog when they were on vacation. Number 4847. A craftsman-style house with an attached 2-car garage, mostly dark except for the blue glow of a television in what was probably the living room. I positioned myself behind a landscaping truck parked at the curve, watching as Melanie pulled into the driveway. She reached for something, the Genie remote obviously, and pointed it at the garage. The door rose silently, smoothly, like it had been well maintained and frequently used. She drove in without hesitation. The door descended. No lights came on. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear, analytical. I knew this house. More specifically, I knew who lived in this house. Kyle Morrison, another Boeing engineer, 2 levels junior to me. We'd worked parallel projects, attended the same design reviews, made polite conversation at company barbecues. 34 years old, married for 4 years to Natasha, who worked as a nurse at Swedish Medical Center. Night shifts, Sunday through Thursday. I remembered Kyle complaining about it at last year's Christmas party, how he rattled on after too many drinks about the lonely evenings, the ship's passing nature of their marriage, how they were lucky to get 12 hours together each week. The TV glow in the living room meant Kyle was awake, waiting. My wife had been in that garage for 6 minutes now. 7, 8. At 9 minutes, the interior garage door must have opened because the TV glow shifted, shadows moving across curtains. Then darkness. Complete darkness in a house where a man had just received my wife into his garage at 11:24 p.m., while his own wife worked to save lives at a hospital 3 cities away. I stayed behind that landscaping truck for another hour, my engineer's mind processing data, calculating possibilities, running scenario analyses. At 12:37 a.m., a light came on briefly in what was probably an upstairs bathroom. At 1:15 a.m., the garage door opened again, and Melanie's Audi emerged, headlights still off until she reached the main road. I took a different route home, arriving 10 minutes before her. Back in bed, breathing steady, body positioned exactly as I'd left it. When she slipped under the covers at 1:48 a.m., she smelled wrong. Not like another man's cologne, they were too smart for that. But there was an absence of her usual scent, like she'd showered somewhere else, used different soap, tried to erase evidence but succeeded only in creating a void that spoke volumes. "Daniel," she whispered, perhaps testing if I was truly asleep. I didn't respond, just shifted slightly and mumbled incoherently like someone deep in dreams. She sighed, turned away from me, and within minutes her breathing suggested she'd fallen asleep. But I lay awake until dawn, my mind running through schematics and systems, understanding that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. It was a machine with hidden components, running subroutines I'd never suspected. And now that I'd found the error in the code, I needed to understand the entire program. The next morning was Friday. I called in sick to work, the first sick day I'd taken in 3 years. "You never take sick days," Melanie said, concern creasing her forehead as she felt my head for fever. "Should I stay home with you?" "No, just need rest. Probably pushed too hard on the Henderson project." I gave her a weak smile. "You have that Patterson audit to finish anyway." She kissed my forehead, chaste, routine, and left for work at her usual time. The moment her car turned the corner, I was up and at my computer, beginning what I would later term my failure analysis investigation. In engineering, when a component fails catastrophically, you don't just identify the breakpoint. You understand the entire sequence of events, the contributing factors, the systemic failures that allowed it to happen. This wasn't just adultery. This was an engineered system of deception operating literally 3 streets away from where I slept. I started with public records. Kyle and Natasha Morrison had purchased 4,847 Oak Meadow Drive 18 months ago. The previous owners, according to county records, had run an automotive restoration business from home. The garage had been modified, reinforced flooring, enhanced electrical systems, separate HVAC controls. Kyle had told neighbors he was continuing the automotive hobby. Perfect cover for any unusual modifications or activities. Their mortgage was with Wells Fargo, stretched to the maximum debt-to-income ratio. County tax records showed they were barely managing payments. Natasha's nursing salary and Kyle's engineer pay should have been comfortable, but the house had stretched them thin. Social media provided context. Natasha's Instagram showed an exhausted woman, treasuring her few daylight hours, posting inspirational quotes about strength and perseverance. Another night shift conquered, with a sunrise photo from the hospital parking garage. Marriage is about supporting each other's dreams even when the timing is hard, with a photo of 2 coffee cups on opposite sides of a table. Kyle's LinkedIn was purely professional, but his Reddit history, username tracked through a programming forum post where he'd shared a Boeing email address, revealed more. Posts in relationship subreddits about dead bedroom syndrome. Questions about whether emotional affairs were really affairs. A deleted post from 6 months ago titled, "How do you know if your marriage is over?" The cached version I found through the Wayback Machine detailed his loneliness, his feelings of abandonment, how he and his wife were like roommates who happened to share a mortgage. But the most damning evidence came from my own wife's digital footprint. Melanie thought she was careful, but she didn't understand data forensics the way an engineer did. Her law firm's billing system, which I could access through our shared home computer where she'd saved her passwords, showed interesting patterns. Hours marked as client development that produced no new clients. Research sessions that generated no work product. She'd been billing the firm for time spent with Kyle, literally charging $400 an hour to commit adultery. I cross-referenced dates. 8 months ago, Melanie had handled Kyle's tax preparation, a favor for a neighbor that I had actually encouraged. He seems overwhelmed with the new house expenses, she'd said. I could help him optimize his deductions. That's kind of you, I'd replied, proud of my wife's generosity. Good to help neighbors. The Genie garage door opener was purchased 2 weeks after that tax preparation, according to the date code on the device. The first Tuesday night insomnia started the following week when I was in Chicago for an aerospace conference. I needed more data. That afternoon, I drove to Home Depot and purchased a trail camera, the kind hunters use, triggered by heat and motion, saving images to the cloud. That evening, while Melanie was at her actual office, I'd called to confirm, I took a walk on the public trail that backed up to Kyle's property. The camera, camouflaged and positioned perfectly, would capture anyone entering or leaving through the back of the property. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I joined the neighborhood watch, citing recent car break-ins as my motivation. This gave me legitimate reasons to patrol, to observe, to document patterns. I installed a frequency scanner in my workshop, tuned specifically to the Genie garage door opener's signal. Every activation was logged, time-stamped, recorded. The data was damning. 127 activations over 3 months. Average duration inside, 97 minutes. Longest visit, 4 hours and 17 minutes on a Saturday when I was golfing with clients. The pattern was precise, algorithmic. Natasha's schedule, I discovered, was posted on the hospital unit's family information board. I'd called pretending to be a grateful patient's relative looking to send a thank you card to the night shift. Melanie's visits aligned perfectly with Natasha's shifts. But data wasn't enough. I needed to understand the system completely. Using thermal imaging equipment I borrowed from Boeing's facilities department under the pretense of checking my own home's insulation, I scanned Kyle's garage from the alley. The heat signatures were revealing. He'd installed heating and cooling systems, added insulation, created what appeared to be a room within a room. They hadn't just been meeting in a garage, they'd built a secret annex. The sophistication impressed even as it appalled. This wasn't a crime of passion, but a carefully planned operation by two intelligent people. Kyle understood engineering and systems. Melanie understood risk management and legal liability. Together, they'd created something that should have been undetectable. Should have been. I discovered their communication system through patient observation. They didn't use phones. Too traceable. Email was out of the question. Instead, they'd implemented something almost admirably clever. Kyle's smart doorbell camera and Melanie's firm's security system could see each other's Wi-Fi networks. They'd created a modern version of Cold War dead drops. A specific sequence of motion detections translated to pre-arranged messages. 3 cars passing Kyle's house between 3:17 and 3:19 p.m. meant tonight is clear. A delivery truck stopping at Melanie's firm after 6 p.m. meant postpone. The financial engineering was equally sophisticated. Melanie hadn't just been stealing time from her firm. She'd established Kyle as a consulting client for her side practice, generating legitimate-looking invoices for tax advisory services. Kyle paid these invoices from an LLC he'd created for aerospace consulting, funded by patent royalties from his previous work at Lockheed Martin. The money circulated cleanly, creating tax deductions for Kyle and reportable income for Melanie that explained any financial discrepancies. 3 weeks into my investigation, I made a disturbing discovery. Kyle had filed 3 new patents, all with Melanie listed as legal counsel. Aviation safety systems with potential military applications. If any succeeded, the royalties would generate enough income for Kyle to leave Natasha without alimony concerns. Melanie had structured the patents to pay out over 20 years, creating a long-term income stream that would survive any divorce proceedings. They weren't just having an affair, they were building a future together, carefully, methodically, using their professional skills to create legal and financial frameworks for a life after their current marriages ended. I found evidence of their contingency planning on Melanie's laptop. A hidden partition I discovered while fixing her computer contained drafted documents for various scenarios. If I discovered the affair, claim emotional abuse and seek sympathetic divorce. If Natasha found out, claim Kyle was being stalked and Melanie was providing legal counsel. If work became involved, sexual harassment countersuit already drafted. Every contingency had a response. Every response had documentation prepared to support it. The physical infrastructure extended beyond the garage. My trail camera and subsequent investigations revealed Kyle had installed professional-grade air filtration, allegedly for automotive painting, but actually to eliminate any trace of perfume or other scents. The garage floor had been treated with an epoxy coating that could be cleaned to forensic standards. UV lights installed for curing paint could also reveal and eliminate biological traces. They'd created a crime scene that cleaned itself. The escalation pattern worried me most. Initially, based on my data reconstruction, the garage meetings were monthly, then bi-weekly. Now the Tuesday-Thursday schedule with occasional additions. Recent data showed acceleration. Melanie had started visiting during lunch hours, using client meetings as cover. Kyle had taken sick days that corresponded with Natasha's occasional day shifts. They were getting careless or desperate, or both. One night, my trail camera captured something that changed my perspective entirely. Natasha arriving home at 3 a.m. from a shift, still in scrubs, looking exhausted. Kyle meeting her at the door with coffee and flowers. The tenderness in his gestures, the gratitude in her tired smile. This wasn't a dead marriage. This was a struggling couple where one partner was actively betraying while performing love. The cruelty of it, the mechanical precision of switching between lover and husband, triggered something cold and calculating in me. I began planning my response with the same methodical approach I used for critical aircraft systems. The goal wasn't just exposure, but complete structural failure of their carefully built system. I would use their own engineering against them. First, I protected myself legally and financially. Over 3 weeks, I carefully liquidated shared assets, converting everything to forms Melanie couldn't trace or claim. I documented her fraud against her law firm with meticulous precision, creating packages that would trigger mandatory reporting requirements. I gathered evidence of Kyle's misuse of Boeing resources, the patent filings done on company time, the research using proprietary databases, the LLC that violated his employment contract's moonlighting clause. Then I began what I called stress testing their system. I started varying my patterns randomly, coming home unexpectedly, suggesting spontaneous date nights on Tuesdays, planning activities that disrupted their schedule. I watched Melanie adapt, creating new excuses, developing new patterns. But adaptation created strain, and strain revealed weaknesses. "Why don't we try that new Italian place tonight?" I suggested one Tuesday. "Oh, I can't. The Patterson audit. Is that still going on? Maybe I should talk to your managing partner about the workload." Her face went pale. "No, No, it's fine. Just this week and next, then it's over. I infiltrated their communication system. The smart home dead drop relied on predictable Wi-Fi behavior. I introduced random interference, a new router that occasionally blocked signals, a smart TV that disrupted their motion detection patterns, electromagnetic interference from a ham radio hobby I suddenly developed. Their messages became unreliable. Plans had to be canceled. I could see the frustration in Melanie's behavior, the way she checked her phone obsessively, looking for signals that weren't coming through. Through Kyle's work computer, which I accessed during a late-night system maintenance at Boeing, I discovered he'd been researching counter-surveillance techniques, studying divorce law in Washington state. His browser history, which he thought he'd deleted but which remained in system restore points, showed hundreds of hours of preparation. But he'd made mistakes. He'd used his work computer to access the LLC bank accounts. He'd printed personal documents on company printers. He'd violated a dozen policies that individually meant nothing, but together painted a picture of misuse of company resources. The masterstroke came from an unexpected source. I discovered Kyle had a severe shellfish allergy, documented in his Boeing medical file. Not life-threatening, but severe enough to require an EpiPen. I began preparing seafood regularly. Shrimp scampi on Mondays, crab cakes on Wednesdays. The smell permeated my clothes, my car, our house. Melanie, returning from the garage, would carry trace amounts home. She started coming back sniffling, eyes watery. "I think I'm developing allergies," she said one night, dabbing at her eyes. "Maybe you should see a doctor," I suggested innocently. But I knew the truth. Kyle was having reactions. Minor but concerning. Their meetings were becoming medical risks. I corrupted their financial structure through precision strikes, anonymous tips to the IRS about the LLC's suspicious transactions. Kyle's patent applications forwarded to Lockheed Martin's legal department with questions about whether they contained proprietary information. A friend at another law firm requested Melanie's consultation on a case that would conflict her out of representing Kyle. Each action seemed random, unconnected, but together they began dismantling the economic foundation of the affair. The garage itself became my weapon. I discovered the modified electrical system wasn't properly permitted. An anonymous tip to the city triggered an inspection. Kyle had to scramble to explain the modifications, pay fines, remove equipment. The safe space became compromised. The smart home system Kyle used had a vulnerability. It logged everything to the cloud, even when users thought they'd disabled recording. I gained access to these logs through a security flaw I discovered, downloading months of activity data. I began psychological operations. Kyle's Reddit account started receiving messages from someone claiming to be Natasha's colleague, hinting she was suspicious. Melanie's law firm received anonymous tips about billing irregularities, triggering internal audits. Neither could be traced to me, but both created paranoia. They started making mistakes, leaving digital footprints, breaking their own protocols. The coup de grace required precise timing. I discovered Natasha's hospital was implementing new scheduling software with a known glitch. It occasionally showed nurses as working when they were off. Through my Boeing connections, I knew someone on the implementation team. A casual conversation about testing the system resulted in a specific Thursday being affected. I then arranged for multiple convergence points. The IRS audit letter would arrive Thursday. The city's stop work order on the garage would be posted Thursday. The law firm's billing audit meeting was scheduled for Thursday, and Natasha, thinking she had a shift but finding herself unexpectedly off, would likely come home Thursday. I called it failure day in my planning documents. March 15th, the Ides of March, seemed poetically appropriate. That morning, I left for a witnessed Boeing leadership conference in Portland, establishing an unshakable alibi while my automated systems executed the plan. I kissed Melanie goodbye, wished her luck with her busy day, and drove away knowing I'd never kiss her again. At 8 a.m., Kyle received the IRS notice about his LLC being audited. The letter, legitimately from the IRS based on my anonymous tip, demanded 5 years of records within 30 days. Kyle, panicking, texted his accountant from his personal phone, breaking his own communication protocol. At 10 a.m., Melanie's law firm convened the billing audit meeting. Partners presented evidence of her client development hours that produced no clients, her research sessions that generated no work product. They didn't accuse her of anything yet, but the questions were pointed, the implications clear. Her managing partner, a woman who'd mentored Melanie for years, looked personally betrayed by the discrepancies. At noon, the city posted the stop work order on Kyle's garage. Bright orange, impossible to miss, declaring the structure unsafe for occupancy until proper permits were obtained and modifications inspected. Kyle, at work, received a photo from his neighbor asking if everything was okay. He had to leave Boeing early, claiming illness, to deal with the situation. At 2 p.m., Natasha discovered the scheduling error. She'd driven to work, changed into scrubs, only to be told she wasn't on the schedule. The hospital, short-staffed, asked if she could stay anyway. She declined, deciding to surprise Kyle with a rare afternoon together. She texted him, but he was dealing with the city inspector and didn't respond. At 3 p.m., my automated system sent its final signal, the all-clear message through the compromised smart home network. Both Kyle and Melanie received it, interpreting it as confirmation that tonight was safe. They didn't know the message originated from my server in Portland, routed through anonymous proxies, undetectable and irreversible. At 6 p.m., Melanie texted me that she had a client emergency, would be home late. I responded from Portland with understanding and love, telling her to be safe. She drove her usual route to Oak Meadow Drive, used the garage door opener, entered the familiar space. Kyle was already there, stressed from the day's disasters, seeking comfort. They didn't notice the new camera I'd installed weeks ago in the garage's smoke detector, streaming everything to the cloud. At 6:47 p.m., Natasha arrived home. What followed was captured by multiple recording devices. The camera in the garage, Natasha's phone, neighbors' security systems. Natasha entered through the front door, calling Kyle's name. No response. She checked his office, the bedroom, the kitchen, then heard something from the garage. Voices, movement, sounds that required no interpretation. The confrontation was volcanic. Natasha's scream was primal, wounded. She pulled the garage door emergency release, flooding the space with suburban twilight. Melanie, disheveled and desperate, tried to flee but found her car blocked by Natasha's. Kyle, attempting explanations that died in his throat, stood frozen between his wife and his lover. The chaos spilled into the driveway. Neighbors emerged, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from across the street, a retired teacher with a smartphone and a Facebook addiction, recorded everything. Tom Bradley from next door, a Boeing colleague who recognized both Kyle and my wife, stood slack-jawed as the scene unfolded. Natasha, with the clarity that comes from complete betrayal, began dismantling their lies methodically. She found the modified garage systems, the hidden equipment, evidence of months of deception. She called 911, reporting trespassing and potential burglary. Melanie had no legal right to be in her home. The police arrived within minutes, took statements, documented everything. Melanie tried to leave, but her car wouldn't start. I'd arranged for a Boeing colleague who lived nearby to sugar her gas tank during the chaos, knowing she'd parked in the same spot for months. She had to call an Uber, standing in the driveway in her disheveled state while neighbors watched and recorded. Kyle's attempts at damage control failed spectacularly. The police investigating the illegal garage modifications found more than expected. The surveillance system Kyle thought protected him had recorded everything. Hundreds of encounters, financial transactions, even conversations about their future plans. The system, connected to the cloud, had already auto-backed up to servers I'd ensured would preserve the evidence. By 10 p.m., the story was on neighborhood Facebook groups, Nextdoor, and local Reddit threads. Boeing engineer's secret garage exposed by nurse wife became viral content. Photos, videos, and testimonies spread faster than any containment effort could manage. Kyle's professional reputation, built over years, destroyed in hours. I received calls from neighbors expressing shock and sympathy. From my Portland hotel room, I performed surprise perfectly, rushing home on a late flight, arriving to find media vans on our street. I played the devastated husband, gave no comments, maintained dignity while my wife's life imploded publicly. I had no idea, I told Tom Bradley when he approached me with sympathy. I trusted her completely. Nobody could have known, he assured me, not realizing how wrong he was. The cascade failure I'd engineered exceeded my calculations. Systems I hadn't targeted failed through secondary effects, creating destruction more complete than planned. Melanie's law firm fired her within 24 hours. Not just termination, but referral to the state bar for ethics violations. Her legal career ended with prejudice. No firm would hire someone who'd billed adultery as client development. Her professional license was suspended pending investigation. 8 years of law school and career development evaporated. Kyle's situation at Boeing became untenable. The company had a morality clause, rarely enforced, but the public nature of the scandal and misuse of company resources made action mandatory. He was placed on administrative leave, then terminated with cause, losing unvested stock options worth $300,000. The patent applications were withdrawn after Lockheed's challenge. His aerospace career was over. No defense contractor could hire someone with his security clearance revoked for moral turpitude. Natasha filed for divorce immediately. Washington's adultery laws allowed her to claim the majority of assets. The house, contaminated by the modified garage, couldn't sell. The city condemned the structure after finding more code violations. Kyle owed more on the mortgage than the land was worth. Bankruptcy became inevitable. The IRS audit revealed exactly what I'd ensured it would find: unreported income, fraudulent deductions, potential criminal tax evasion. Both Kyle and Melanie faced federal charges. Their clever financial engineering became evidence of conspiracy to defraud the government. Jail time was possible, financial ruin certain. My divorce was surgical. Melanie, with no income and facing criminal charges, couldn't afford representation. The evidence was so overwhelming that even a sympathetic judge couldn't help her. She received nothing. No alimony, no property, no retirement sharing. I kept everything, including recordings that could further incriminate her if she ever challenged the settlement. "How could you?" she asked during our single face-to-face meeting at her lawyer's office, a public defender handling the divorce pro bono. "How could I what?" I responded calmly. "Discover your affair? That was your doing, not mine." "You know what I mean. All of this, the IRS, the firm, everything falling apart at once. Sometimes systems fail catastrophically," I said, using engineering terminology she'd heard me use 1,000 times. "When there's a fundamental flaw in the design, multiple components can fail simultaneously. It's not orchestrated, it's inevitable." She stared at me, perhaps seeing for the first time the engineer she'd married. Precise, logical, thorough. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew and you planned this." I knew my wife was committing adultery with a neighbor, while his wife worked night shifts to support them. Everything else was just consequence following cause. "You built a house of cards, Melanie. I didn't knock it down. I just stopped preventing the wind from blowing." The neighborhood turned against both couples. Kyle and Natasha's house was vandalized repeatedly. "Cheater," spray painted on the garage door that started everything. Melanie couldn't return to our home. Neighbors made their hostility clear. She moved in with her mother in Tacoma, commuting to Seattle for court appearances and bar hearings. 6 months later, the full consequences were clear. Kyle worked at a hardware store in Spokane, living in a studio apartment, wages garnished for tax debt and Natasha's divorce settlement. His engineering skills worthless without the ability to get security clearance. He'd aged visibly, the precision and confidence that defined him replaced by defeat. I encountered him once at a professional conference I attended as a speaker. He was working the vendor booth for a tools company, demonstrating precision measuring equipment to engineers who might have been his colleagues in another timeline. "Daniel," he said when he saw me, his voice hollow. "Kyle." I nodded, professional, distant. "I suppose you hate me?" "Hate requires emotional investment. I'm an engineer, Kyle. I solve problems. You were a problem, now you're not. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No system ever fails the way it's supposed to. That's why we build redundancies. But you removed all your redundancies, didn't you? You put everything at risk for something that was always going to fail. Does it make you happy, seeing me like this?" I considered the question seriously. Happy isn't the right word. Satisfied, perhaps. When you test a system to failure and it fails exactly as predicted, there's satisfaction in the validation of your analysis. Melanie never practiced law again. Disbarred for ethics violations, she worked remotely as a bookkeeper for a small firm that didn't Google applicants. The woman who'd billed $400 an hour now earned $18, her legal knowledge useless without a license. She lived with her mother, drove a 15-year-old Corolla, wore clothes from Goodwill. I saw her once at a Starbucks in Tacoma, nearly a year after everything collapsed. She was sitting alone, working on a laptop that I recognized as one I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary, now held together with duct tape. She looked up, our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she gathered her things and left, abandoning a half-finished coffee that probably represented a significant portion of her disposable income for the week. Natasha emerged strongest from the wreckage. The nursing community rallied around her, offering support and opportunities. She transferred to day shift, started dating a cardiologist who appreciated her strength, sold her story to a true crime podcast for enough money to start over. She sent me a single message through LinkedIn. "Thank you for the evidence." I never replied, but I was glad she'd found a path forward. She was collateral damage in a war she didn't know was being fought, and her recovery brought me the closest thing to regret I felt about the entire operation. The Oak Meadow house eventually sold at foreclosure. The new owners, unaware of its history, converted the garage back to its intended purpose. But neighbors remembered. Every time a garage door opened on that street, someone thought of the night when suburban secrets spilled into driveways, when carefully engineered deceptions failed spectacularly, when the precision of adultery met the chaos of discovery. I still live 3 streets away, in the same house Melanie and I once shared. I've redecorated, removing all traces of her presence, returning the space to the ordered simplicity I prefer. My workshop has expanded into what was once her home office. The breakfast nook where we used to drink coffee together now holds my technical manuals and patent applications. Sometimes walking my new dog, a German shepherd named Euler after the mathematician, I pass the Oak Meadow house. The garage door is different now, a roll-up model, not the sectional door that had hidden so much. I pause, remembering the months of planning, the precise execution, the total system failure I'd orchestrated. Then I continue walking, an engineer who'd solved his most personal problem with professional precision, leaving wreckage that would never fully clear. The third remote remains in my safe, never disposed of, a trophy and reminder. Every marriage I'd learned had hidden frequencies, secret codes, invisible doors that opened to other lives. I'd found my wife's hidden door and hadn't just closed it. I'd destroyed the entire structure it opened into, leaving nothing but rubble and regret where once stood a carefully engineered deception. Colleagues sometimes ask why I don't date, why I don't try again. They don't understand that trust, once you've seen how systematically it can be violated, becomes an engineering problem without a solution. Every potential partner is now a system with hidden subroutines, possible backdoors, potential cascading failures waiting to happen. You'll find someone, Tom Bradley tells me at neighborhood gatherings, someone trustworthy. But I know better. Trust isn't about finding the right person. It's about accepting that any system involving humans contains inherent flaws, potential failures, hidden modes of operation. I've become very good at identifying these flaws, these potential failures. Too good, perhaps, to ever ignore them. My life now runs with mechanical precision. Wake at 5:30, coffee at 5:45, workout at 6, work from 7:30 to 5:30, dinner at 6:30, workshop or reading until 10 o'clock, sleep by 10:30. No variations, no surprises, no hidden doors or secret frequencies. It's a life stripped of vulnerability, which means it's also stripped of certain possibilities. But for an engineer who's seen what happens when systems fail catastrophically, it's the only design that makes sense. The Patterson audit that Melanie claimed was consuming her Tuesday and Thursday nights. I looked it up recently. Patterson Industries had filed for bankruptcy 6 months before Melanie started working on their audit. The entire thing had been fabricated, a cover story as elaborate as the affair itself. She'd created fictional work product, fake emails, even dummy files on her laptop to support the lie. The attention to detail was impressive, in a horrible way. But she'd made one crucial error, the same error that dooms most engineered systems. She'd assumed the other components in the system, me, would continue operating predictably, that I would never look closely, never question, never investigate. She'd built her deception on the foundation of my trust, not realizing that trust, like any component, could be examined, tested, and ultimately removed from the equation. Kyle made a different but equally fatal error. He'd assumed his system was closed, that what happened in the garage stayed in the garage. But no system is truly closed. Every action creates reactions, energy transfers, evidence trails. The garage door opener frequency bleeding into nearby spectrums. The power consumption spikes showing up in utility data. The wear patterns on the driveway from repeated use. The trace evidence that no amount of air filtration or UV light could completely eliminate. They'd both forgotten the fundamental law of engineering. Every system fails eventually. The only question is whether you'll be the one controlling the failure or the one crushed by it. I controlled it. Precisely, methodically, completely. There's a new family in Melanie's and my old favorite restaurant now, sitting at what we used to call our table by the window. Young couple, early 30s, laughing over wine and pasta, holding hands between courses. The woman wears a wedding ring that catches the light when she gestures. The man looks at her like she's his entire world. I want to warn them. Want to tell them about hidden garage door openers and Tuesday night insomnia and billing fraud disguised as client development. Want to explain that trust is a design flaw, that love is a vulnerability, that every system of two people contains the potential for catastrophic failure. But I don't. I finish my meal alone at the bar, pay my check, and leave them to their illusion. They'll learn, or they won't. They'll fail, or they won't. Either way, it's not my system to analyze. The Boeing leadership has been impressed with my work since the divorce. Without distractions, I've become even more precise, more thorough, more capable of identifying potential failures before they manifest. I've received 2 promotions and a security clearance upgrade. There's talk of making me lead engineer for the next military contract. You're like a machine, my new supervisor told me admiringly after I identified a critical flaw everyone else had missed. You see everything. Not everything. I hadn't seen the garage door opener for who knows how long, hadn't noticed the Tuesday night patterns until they were already established, hadn't recognized the systematic deception operating in my own life until I literally held the evidence in my hand. But now I see everything. Every inconsistency, every pattern, every potential point of failure. It's exhausting and isolating, and probably unhealthy. But it's also safe. No one will ever again build a secret system in my life. No one will ever again use my trust as a foundation for deception. No one will ever again make me the fool who didn't know his wife was spending Tuesday and Thursday nights in a garage 3 streets over. The Genie garage door opener sits in my safe, wrapped in an evidence bag I'll never need to use. Model Gen R3X, manufactured 2019, serial number partially worn but still visible. 3 buttons: open, close, light. The open button worn smooth from thousands of presses, each one a small betrayal, a tiny treason, a microscopic crack in the foundation of a marriage. Sometimes I take it out and hold it, feeling its weight, negligible in ounces, catastrophic in consequences. Such a small thing to destroy so much. But then, the O-ring that destroyed the Challenger was even smaller. The flaw that brought down the Columbia was practically microscopic. In engineering, size doesn't determine significance. The smallest component, failing at the right moment, can bring down the entire system. That's what Melanie never understood, what Kyle never grasped, even with all his engineering training. They thought they were building something, a relationship, a future, a new life together. But they were actually introducing a fatal flaw into multiple existing systems. Every secret meeting, every lie, Every bill marked to the wrong client was another stress fracture, another point of potential failure. They were saboteurs in their own lives, terrorists in their own marriages, and they didn't even realize it. Or maybe they did realize it and didn't care. Maybe the thrill was worth the risk. Maybe the Tuesday and Thursday nights in that garage were so transcendent that the inevitable catastrophic failure seemed like a reasonable price to pay. I'll never know, because I'll never ask, and they'll never tell. What I do know is this. Every system has a breaking point. Every marriage has a hidden frequency. Every trust has a limit. The only question is whether you'll find these limits through careful testing or catastrophic failure. I found mine through a discarded garage door opener, covered in dust and receipt fragments, hidden between the passenger seat and center console of an Audi Q5. 3 streets over, 97 minutes average, 127 activations. The numbers that defined the end of my marriage, the parameters of betrayal, the specifications of destruction. I'm an engineer. I understand machines. But I'm learning that understanding doesn't mean controlling, that identifying failure points doesn't mean preventing failures, that knowing how something breaks doesn't mean knowing how to fix it. The garage at 4847 Oak Meadow Drive has been repaired, permitted, returned to its original purpose. The new owners park their cars there, store their bicycles, keep their lawn equipment. They have no idea what that space once was, what happened there on Tuesday and Thursday nights, how it served as the nexus for the destruction of 2 marriages and 4 careers. But I know, every time I pass that house, every time I hear a garage door opening, every time I see a couple walking hand in hand, I know. And that knowledge, precise and undeniable and forever, is both my revenge and my prison. Because once you've seen how easily trust can be engineered into betrayal, how quickly love can be converted to deception, how thoroughly a life can be destroyed by a single hidden component, you can never unsee it. You can only build better systems, with more redundancies, more fail-safes, more isolation between critical components. Or you can do what I've done. Remove the vulnerable components entirely. Strip the system down to its most basic, most reliable, most predictable elements. A life without trust is a life without betrayal. A life without love is a life without heartbreak. A life without connections is a life without cascading failures. It's not much of a life, perhaps, but it's engineered to last, built to specifications, designed to function exactly as intended without surprises or hidden subroutines or secret garage door frequencies. And for an engineer who's experienced total system failure, that's enough. That has to be enough.